When I handed my father the keys to his new truck, he laughed, said, "What is this? A prank?" My mother didn't even look up from her phone. My brother snorted, "Since when do waitresses buy trucks?" So I smiled, pushed the keys back into my pocket, and said, "No worries, it's not for you anymore." Then I turned around and left, but that was the end. The part people remember, the part that shocked them. They didn't notice the years before. The slow, quiet dying of something small. Like a light in a hallway no one uses anymore. My name is Camilla. I'm 29th, middle child, daughter, invisible. I used to think that if I worked hard enough, they'd see me. I got good grades. No one came to graduation. I cleaned the house after parties I wasn't invited to. They never thanked me. I stayed quiet, because being loud meant arguments. And I didn't like screaming, not when I was 6, not when I was 16. But silence didn't save me. It just made me easier to ignore. My brother, he wrecked 3 cars before age 25. They still call him the Golden Boy. He shows up late, leaves early, and always gets a plate wrapped up for him. Me, I could disappear for weeks. They'd never notice. The last time I tried to share a win, a promotion, small one, but still, my dad blinked and said, "Oh, you're still doing that cafe job?" Not even the name of the place, not even the right position. That was the rhythm. Me offering, them dismissing. Thanksgiving was the same every year. Long table, loud voices. Too much salt in everything. I always brought something homemade, my lemon tarts. My dad loved them when I was a kid. So I brought them again, year after year, placed them carefully on the corner of the counter, only to watch them go untouched, while my cousin's store-bought pie got compliments. That year, I'd taken time off to come, 3 days unpaid, closed the cafe early, even though I'm the one who runs it, paid extra for the long-distance ticket, bought my dad a bottle of single malt, imported, not cheap. It wasn't about the price, it was about remembering. I walked in, no one looked up, just the same chaos. My aunt arguing about stuffing, my cousin on speakerphone with her new boyfriend, my brother yelling from the basement for someone to bring him a beer. I stood there for a second, holding the bottle in one hand, the tart box in the other, my coat still on, my smile already fading. My mother glanced up, frowned, said, "You look tired," then walked away. I unpacked the gifts, put the bottle on the counter next to the cheap whiskey someone brought, placed the tarts in the fridge, changed into a royal blue dress, the kind that fits just right, clean, simple, respectable. I thought maybe they'd notice, just once. My mom stared for a second, said, "Is that what you're wearing?" I nodded. She didn't say more. Dinner was loud, the turkey was dry. My uncle made 3 jokes about immigrants, even though half of us were born in other countries. I didn't speak much, not because I didn't want to, but because no one listened. When I finally said something, just a comment about the bakery I was opening next spring, my brother leaned in and said, "Wait, you're still doing that waitress thing?" Like it was funny, like all my work was a hobby. Someone laughed. I don't remember who. My dad tapped my hand. "Sweetheart, you should think about a real career. You're almost 30. The table nodded, like he'd said something profound. I nodded too, didn't argue, didn't defend. Because what was the point? They'd already decided who I was. Quiet girl, helper, background character. My cousin got a toast for getting into a 3rd-tier law school. She dropped out 3 months later. No one toasted me. Not when I bought my own apartment. Not when I hired my first employee. After dinner, I stood up, said I needed some air. No one asked if I was okay. No one offered to join me. I walked into the kitchen, looked at the bottle I brought, untouched. Next to it, an opened jug of bottom-shelf liquor. I opened the fridge. The lemon tarts were still there, unopened, unnoticed. I closed the fridge, took my coat, walked to the door. Halfway there, my aunt noticed. "You're leaving already?" I nodded. She said, "At least take some leftovers." I said, "No, thank you." She shrugged. I looked at the people in that room, all of them laughing, talking over each other, none of them looking at me. I felt nothing, no sadness, no fire, just a deep, settling stillness, like I'd finally understood something. Not in my head, in my body, in my bones. That I wasn't part of them, not really, not anymore. They didn't see me, so I stopped offering myself to be seen. I opened the door, cold wind, dark sky, quiet. No one followed, no one called after me. I didn't slam the door, I didn't say goodbye, I just left, and no one came after me. I walked to the end of the driveway. The street was quiet, my breath visible, my hands shaking, not from cold, just from release. I didn't cry, didn't curse, didn't replay the scene in my head. I just walked, and when I reached the bus station, I bought a one-way ticket. No return date. No one asked where I was going. No one noticed I was gone. I turned my phone off, not out of spite, just for silence, for once. The ride back to the city took 6 hours. I stared out the window, didn't think, didn't sleep, just let the darkness pass me by. When I got back to my apartment, I threw my dress into the trash. The blue one still smelled like their house, like fried onions, and old disappointment. I stood in the shower for 40 minutes, water scalding, like I was trying to peel the past off my skin. I didn't tell anyone what happened, didn't text a friend, didn't post about it. There was nothing to say, because it wasn't new. It had always been that way. I had just finally stopped pretending it wasn't. I deleted their numbers, blocked the group chat, muted birthdays, turned off notifications from people who never noticed mine. Then I got to work. Not revenge, not rage, just building. The cafe wasn't just a job, it was mine. My name on the lease, my hands on the dough, my hours, my staff, my rules. Every morning, I woke at 4 a.m., rolled croissants by hand, brewed the first pot of coffee, opened the doors by 6. Customers started noticing, first the smell, then the warmth, then me. They asked my name, told me the almond brioche reminded them of Paris, said the coffee tasted like comfort, left reviews, came back, brought friends. 6 months later, I hired a second baker, then a third, started selling out by noon, had to add a second fridge, then a second location, no investors, no handouts, just me, and the version of me they never cared to know. I studied at night, took online courses on business taxes, food safety, payroll, branding, learned how to negotiate leases, how to speak in a tone that made men stop interrupting, how to hold eye contact without apology. On my 28th birthday, I bought myself a used car, paid in cash. I drove it to the edge of town, parked by the lake, ate one of my own lemon tarts, no candles, no one singing, just me, breathing. The cafe won 2 local awards, then a magazine feature, then a sponsorship. My name, printed, photographed, respected. But I didn't send them the article, didn't post it online, didn't wonder if they'd be proud, because I no longer needed them to be. I moved into a new apartment, higher floor, bigger windows, no memories, fewer phone calls, less noise, more peace. The holidays came and went. I worked through them, opened the cafe on Thanksgiving, served fresh pies to anyone who walked in alone. There were many, more than I expected. One man cried when I handed him a slice, said it reminded him of his sister. I didn't ask, just handed him a second one for free. And in that moment, I realized something. I didn't miss them. I missed being seen, but not by them, because they had their chance, years of chances, and they spent them laughing, talking over me, looking through me. I didn't keep photos of them in my new place. No frames, no albums, not out of anger, just necessity. You don't hang pictures of smoke, you don't preserve shadows. I got better at boundaries, learned to say no without guilt, to leave messages unanswered, to detach without explanation. One day, my mother left a voicemail, said they missed me, said they were worried, but never said sorry. I didn't respond. A month later, my brother called, said he was in town, wanted to grab a bite. I let the phone ring, then blocked his number. I wasn't punishing anyone, I was just free. People don't understand that kind of freedom, the kind you earn through silence, through not reacting, through letting things die without mourning. I didn't explain my choices, didn't defend my distance, because the moment you explain why you left, You invite them to argue, you should have stayed. And I was done arguing. The day I signed the lease for the third cafe, I bought a new coat. Tailored, slate gray, wool. When I put it on, I barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, but because I looked real, like someone who belonged in her own life. I walked past people on the street. Strangers smiled, said, "Love your coat." No one had ever complimented my coat growing up, or my laugh, or my mind, but now they did, because now I wasn't waiting for my family to see me. I had already become someone else, someone whole, someone visible. I lived like that for over a year, quietly successful, comfortably alone, not lonely, just unobserved. And for once, that felt like power. Until one day a letter arrived, cream envelope, formal, my father's name in the top left corner. Inside a sentence, brief, unexpected. It didn't say sorry, didn't ask for money, didn't demand anything. It said, "I need to see you." Before it's too late. No punctuation, no emotion, just those 10 words. And just like that, after 2 years of silence, I was being pulled back, not with force, but with gravity. That strange family gravity that tells you, even when you're free, you're still tethered. I held the letter for a long time, then placed it on the counter. Made tea, didn't react, didn't answer. Not right away. I wasn't afraid, I wasn't hopeful, I just wasn't sure. If the girl they once ignored still lived in me, or if she had finally fully vanished. I didn't reply to the letter for 4 days. I left it on the counter, under a magnet, next to receipts. Every time I walked past it, I read it again. "I need to see you before it's too late." I never liked vague sentences. They're always weapons, disguised as invitations. But I went, not because I was curious, not because I missed him, but because I was no longer afraid of who I'd be in that house. I packed a small bag, plain clothes, neutral makeup, unbranded shoes. I didn't want to look rich. I wanted to look untouchable. The drive back took 3 hours. I didn't listen to music, just the sound of the road, the hum of distance closing. The house looked the same. Brown lawn, faded shutters, wind chimes tangled. I parked across the street, watched for a moment, then stepped out. My mother opened the door before I knocked. She looked older, but not gentler. She said, "Oh, it's you." Like I was late to something. She stepped aside, didn't hug me, didn't smile. The hallway smelled like old candles and reheated meat. The same furniture, same stains. My brother was on the couch, game controller in hand, didn't look up. I walked past them, straight to the back room. My father was sitting up in bed, thin, gray, breathing like each inhale was borrowed. He looked at me, not through me, at me. I sat in the chair by the window, didn't say a word. For a minute, he didn't either. Then he said, "You look different," I said. "I am." He nodded, hands shaking as he reached for a glass. Missed, water spilled. I didn't move. My mother came in, wiped the table, said, "She thinks she's too good for us now." No one responded. She left, muttering. My father asked, "What have you been doing?" I told him. Plain facts. 3 cafes, 12 employees, 1 apartment, no debt. He blinked, once, twice, didn't speak for a full minute. Then, "We were hard on you." Not an apology, just a statement. I said nothing. He asked if I hated him. I looked at his face, thin skin, sunken eyes, all the sharpness gone, and I said, "No. I just stopped needing you." His eyes watered. He turned his head away, like he didn't want me to see him break, but I didn't care, because I wasn't there to heal him. I wasn't there to cry with him. I was there to look at him. One last time, as someone I used to want love from, and no longer did. We sat in silence, not uncomfortable, just final. Then he said, "You always were the strong one." I almost laughed, but I didn't. He reached for my hand, held it, his fingers cold, dry. I didn't pull away, but I didn't grip back. I let him hold it, because I could, because it didn't cost me anything anymore. He asked if I could stay the night. I said no. He nodded, didn't ask why. I stood. He didn't let go at first, then he did. He said, "I'm proud of you." I nodded, not because I needed to hear it, but because he needed to say it. I left the room. closed the door quietly. My mother was waiting in the hallway, said, "Well?" "What did he say?" I said, "He said goodbye." She didn't like that, said I was dramatic, said I always wanted attention. I kept walking. My brother was still on the couch, feet up, eating chips. He looked at me and said, "You think you're better than us now?" I stared at him for a full 5 seconds, then said, "No." I always was. He didn't know what to say. So he went back to his game. I opened the front door, paused, turned back, said to no one in particular, "If any of you ever wanted something from me, that time's past." Then I walked out. I drove back to the city in silence. Arrived just before midnight. Opened the cafe the next morning at 6. Everything smelled like sugar and espresso. Customers laughed, music played. My staff greeted me like I mattered. No one asked how the visit went. No one mentioned the family I used to belong to. Because I didn't bring that version of me back with me. She stayed there, in that house, at that table, in that silence. Weeks passed, then a month, then 2. I got a letter from my father's lawyer. Estate matters, a will. I didn't cry, didn't feel relief. Just read the papers, signed where I needed to. He left me something, a small savings account, and a note. It said, "You did it without me." But I see it now. I closed the envelope, put it in a drawer, didn't deposit the money, still haven't. My cousin got married that spring, sent an invitation, handwritten, said she'd love if I came. "Everyone would love to see you." I didn't reply, didn't attend, didn't explain, because I wasn't angry, I just wasn't theirs anymore. I had returned, seen what was left, and found nothing worth staying for. They had built their stories without me, and now I had mine, not louder, not flashier, just truer. No one clapped, no one toasted, no one begged me to come back, because they still didn't understand what they lost, and I wasn't going to teach them. I didn't attend the funeral, didn't send flowers, didn't write a eulogy. I opened the cafe that day, served coffee, folded napkins, smiled at strangers. Someone else read the will, someone else cried. I was not mentioned in the obituary. They called it a private family service. I laughed when I read that. I was never part of the family, just part of the labor. After he died, my brother called, left a voicemail, said he needed help sorting through things, said he could really use a loan. I blocked the number. My mother tried next, called the cafe, used a different name, said she just wanted to talk. I hung up, unlisted the business line after that. I wasn't avoiding them. I just stopped offering myself up, like a meal no one appreciated. They came to the cafe once. My mother, my brother, stood outside, didn't come in. They looked through the glass, saw me arranging pastries, smiling at a child. Wearing that slate gray coat, they didn't wave, didn't knock, just stood there, watching, and I watched back, blankly, until they left. 2 weeks later, I got a call from my cousin, the one they all ignored at holidays, the quiet girl in the corner. She said, "I heard what you did. I just wanted to say thank you." I had transferred money into her account, enough for her tuition, books, a place to stay. She asked why. I said, "Because I remember what it felt like." She cried. I didn't. Then she said, "I won't waste it." I believed her. That same week, my brother posted on Facebook, said the family was going through a hard time, said they needed support, said I had abandoned them. People commented, "Families fight. She'll come around. You only get one family." I read every comment, didn't reply. I wasn't coming around. Because I wasn't circling anymore, I had stepped off their orbit, into my own gravity. One night, I got a letter from the estate lawyer. There was another will, a second version. It named my brother as primary beneficiary, my mother as co-executor. But the lawyer said something odd, that a third, private document had been found, signed by my father, dated 6 months before his death. In it, he removed my brother, removed my mother. He gave the house to charity, the savings to the cousin I helped, and a handwritten line at the bottom, "Everything else, if anything, is hers." She earned it without asking. He didn't sign it with love, just a name, just acknowledgement. It wasn't revenge, it was recognition, the kind that arrives too late. Still, I accepted the transfer, sold what was left, donated half, kept the rest. I didn't tell them, didn't brag, didn't explain, but they knew. Of course they knew. My mother sent a letter, said she was disappointed, said I had twisted his mind, said he'd been confused. I didn't write back. I was never the favorite. I was the function, the help, the invisible investment they thought would never grow. But it grew, quietly, out of their sight, beyond their reach. My brother showed up at the third cafe once, hair messy, voice too loud, asked for me by name, said he just wanted to talk. I told the staff, tell him I don't know that name. He left, didn't come back. Another month passed. I bought a building, downtown, old, beautiful, 3 stories, red brick, wide windows, turned it into a community kitchen, taught classes, gave jobs, fed kids. A reporter came, asked why I did it. I said, because I know what it means to go unseen. They published the article, my name, my face, my story, the one my family never wanted to hear, now in print, now undeniable. People started recognizing me on sidewalks, in elevators, at markets. Are you the cafe girl? Did you really build all this from nothing? I always said the same thing, from silence. I got invited to speak at schools, women's shelters, business conferences. But I never talked about my family, not once, because they were no longer the beginning of my story, just a prologue I'd outgrown. One day I walked past their old house, for no reason, just passing by. The yard was unkempt, blinds closed, a different name on the mailbox. It was gone. The place I once tried so hard to belong to, now someone else's burden. I stood there for a moment, then kept walking. I didn't burn bridges, I just stopped walking back. And they stayed where they were, in the past, in each other's shadows, still loud, still sure, still wrong. I let them believe I was still the quiet girl, still the helper, still waiting to be called back to the table. And maybe they'll believe that forever, but I'm not. I haven't been for years. I became someone else, and that someone never needed their approval, only her own. I didn't scream, didn't argue, didn't prove anything. I just built and built, until the life I wanted made the one I came from irrelevant. They don't talk about me now, not in public, not proudly, because to admit who I became would mean admitting what they lost. So they don't. They rewrite, they deflect, they diminish. But none of that matters, because I have everything I need, my cafes, my peace, my power. And the sentence that changed it all, I just stopped needing you. If you've ever lived that sentence, you already know. They thought I was still the quiet girl. I let them believe that as I walked past them, for the last time. If you've ever been the invisible one and built something they never saw coming, share this story, and thank you for staying until the end.